cookie and some refreshment. We do have some of those in the back, but we're going to get started here with a prayer led by Mike. If you could make your way over here, Mike.
Before I pray, I just wanted to share something I was reading from our founding fathers, and that Benjamin Franklin wrote about prayer, and I wanted to read it all, but it's longer than I expected. So I just want to let you know that he was talking about how they prayed before they went into battle, they prayed before they went into meeting for their decision making, and he says, maybe we've forgotten this. And he says, the longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see of this truth, that God governs in the affairs of men. And if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice, is it probable that an empire can rise without his aid? We have been assured, sir, in the sacred writings that except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that try to build it. I firmly believe this, and I also believe that without his concurring aid, we shall succeed in this political building no better than the builders of Babel. I therefore beg leave to move that henceforth prayers imploring the assistance of heaven and its blessings on our deliberations be held in this assembly every morning before we proceed to business. I think those are encouraging words, because if we think about what's said in 1 Peter, that the devil is a roaring lion and it prowls around, and there's a lot of darkness in our world. So tonight, as we get to talk about things that are important for us, we need to make sure to let God be part of that. Let's go to him in prayer. Heavenly Father, may we give you this floor, along with the speakers we have. We ask for wisdom. We ask for guidance. We ask for you to encourage us through this meeting, that it'll help us as we strive to live in this country, to live in Iowa together. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Mike. And in true Gaza Forum fashion, we are going to also do the Pledge of Allegiance. If I could have you all stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. For those of you who maybe don't know myself, I'm Danny Rader from Sutherland, Iowa. My help up here is Denise Steffen, also from Sutherland. Tonight we're here to talk about property rights. This is not meant to be a contentious meeting. We're here to give you resources and some insight onto different things going on and some different threats we see to the Constitution currently happening. We are going to have first up here Lynn Evans, Zach Deacon, and Steve King. They're going to give us some updates on some of those topics, and then we're going to follow those three up with some question time. And then after that, we will hear from Tammy Kopsa with the John Birch Society. I do have 2 questions up here currently. We probably have room for 2 more there in the middle. If you do have any questions, find one of our guys. I see Chuck is in the back there. If you would want to hand him a question to bring up to me in that time frame. Otherwise, let's get started with, who's going to go first? Zach? Which one do you want? Okay. We're going to give them a little bit of time. As moderator, I will cut you off at your 7 minutes, so please don't make me tackle you. And like I said, we're here to learn. If anyone wants to be disruptive, we will take care of you. So, not me personally, obviously, but I know people.
Well, I'm not probably going to go to my 7 minutes. I'm not the star of the show, but thanks for showing up. As far as just a legislative update, I would say my head's still spinning. But thank you for the people that have supported me down there through emails, phone calls, just coming down to visit. And I would say even if perhaps you didn't personally support me, I do still encourage you to continue to show up and do what's right and fight for your country. So it was a pleasure to pledge allegiance to my country every day when I was down there. Every day when I was down in session, it was an absolute honor to be down there. I didn't take it for granted, and I don't think my family did either. My wife sacrificed just as much as I did. So As far as the topic at hand, certainly voted for the 90% bill. I was rather disappointed that we couldn't do better. Personally, would have liked to see the eminent domain issue dealt with wholeheartedly, if you want to say it that way. But 90% is what we could do. It was disappointing, but I felt like it would have been disingenuous to my constituents to vote against it, just because it maybe wasn't 100%. That was just my conviction, and I know that you could disagree with that all day long. I internally wrestled with that decision right up until the vote, to be honest with you. I do plan on introducing my piece of legislation that I introduced last year that dealt with land surveyors. I introduced a piece of legislation last year that would have taken their exemption away from being charged with criminal trespass if they're on your land. One of the things that I saw my streams cross paths as far as legislative and then law enforcement was this idea that you guys were really upset, and I'm not a farm landowner, but I have an acreage, and well, I should say anybody who owns a house owns land. And so as somebody who is a landowner myself, I saw it very problematic from a law enforcement perspective that these people can just show up on your land and not be removed or charged with anything. That was very confusing to me once I learned that, because if I don't want you on my property, I mean, and I actually have family members who are in land surveying and whatnot, and so it's not necessarily a direct attack on them, but by golly, I thought it was a good idea. It was striking maybe at the root of one of the problems, and that these people are harassing you, and they're harassing us, and so that's because they know that they can, and they can get away with it without consequence, and so plan on reintroducing that piece of legislation come January. It did pass out of the Judiciary Committee, I believe, and then it ended up getting washed away. And so the bill that I introduced that dealt with land surveyors and trespass actually made it out of committee, but then was never brought to the floor. Don't ask me why, I don't have an answer for you. We all kind of sat around and waited for it to pop up, and it just never showed up. And so as far as other things that happened, I'm very proud of a lot of the things that I voted against. I think that our government is bloated. The amount of bills that were introduced over a 4-month period is insane. And so I was very proud of a lot of the things that I was able to vote against and stop. One of those things that we actually stopped in the 11th hour was a bill that would have, in general, because the bill's dead now, thankfully, in general, it would have allowed foreign entities to own our land, own our own Iowa land for the sake of economic development. I was a loud voice in killing that. I think that we need to figure out ways to develop things and develop our communities, but allowing foreign entities to own our land is something that I found very problematic, and I hope that you guys can see why that would be problematic. So with that being said, I look forward to mingling, I look forward to questions, I look forward to any conversation that would be had. It's very hard to try to sum up, especially for a new guy, the whirlwind that I encountered over the last 4 months. It was a lot to take in, but I was very proud to be down there for you, to be your voice, and I'm still very proud of our country. I'm still very proud of our form of government. We just need to take it back. It still is the best country in the world. We just need to put her back on the rails, and there's not another place I would rather live. So thank you for your support, and I look forward to continuing to talk to you. Thank you.
I'm Lynn Evans, most of you know me. I'm your senator for this district. Extremely proud of representing Northwest Iowa, an area that I grew up in my home. So I echo a lot of Zach's sentiments. As a freshman, you get a lot of stuff thrown on your plate in a short amount of time, and this was not a typical session from what I've heard from the veterans down there. That this was more of a whirlwind than what maybe Zach or I anticipated. But to be honest with you, it wasn't a whole lot different than what I expected it was going to be. I think we all know the influence of money on politicians. I didn't understand the depth of that until I hit peak behind the curtain. make large contributions to your campaign. They expect something in return. And honestly, that's sad. And it shouldn't work that way, but it does. I've heard a lot of people say, well, you give them PACs and all that, and it goes away. But I don't think necessarily that would take care of all of it. But it is a reality, and it is disappointing. So when people say, so what was one thing that disappointed you the most? That probably was the thing that disappointed me the most. Not necessarily some of the legislation got through or did not get through, but just the ability of money to influence people's decisions. Good people. There's a lot of good people down there. If somebody throws $10,000 in the campaign, they expect something in return. So fortunately, I'm terrible at fundraising. So I don't get that kind of influence necessarily. The special session, we'll talk about that a little bit. So we get called back into special session. One topic. Only the things that you saw in the paper or on the news were only the things that were fit to put in print or on television. It was the most mind-numbing, gross stuff that was going on during the protests. And I guarantee you that not all of them are Iowa protesters. There was a couple busloads that came in and dropped people off. So I'm guessing there were some paid out of state protesters. But I took a picture of one of the signs. There's no way that Elijah could put it in the paper because it's that obscene, that gross. And the chants, we adjourned after the House, so anybody who was over there being entertained by the House all came over to the Senate afterwards. And when we yelled out, it was just the most obscene things that were verbally hurled at us. One person mooned us. Yeah, it's funny, but it's not funny because it was just sick. And we're down there protecting, honestly, we're down there protecting lives. So no matter how you really felt about the bill itself, that was important. And the bill that we ran is similar to the bill that was already in Iowa code. It's already in law. So basically we were dared by the Supreme Court that we couldn't pass a similar bill. It was one of those hold my beer moments. And we went back there and we put it right back in front of them. So should we have gone farther? I'd love to see it go farther. I think it can go farther. But they're going to now have to rule on it with a whole different federal set of expectations with Roe being overturned. So now we've got some precedents on our side. So it'll be interesting to see. 9:30 the next morning after we passed it, it was contested, even before the governor signed it, which was not unexpected. So part of the reason for the special session was so that we could get that acted on, off our plate, and when we go back in January, we can start back into some real work because we knew it was going to get, no matter what we passed, we knew it was going to get tested the minute it was passed. So let's run that through the court. Hopefully by January, the Supreme Court will make the right decision this time. And with that, I am not the keynote, so I'm going to pass it over to whoever's next. I've already talked long enough. I guess my 7 minutes has got to be quick. And I will hang around as long as you want me to hang around afterwards to answer questions or be berated, whichever you'd like. So.
Next up is going to be Mr. Steve King. You want to join us up here? After Steve, we will have a few questions read. Like I said, if while Steve's talking you think of another question, you want to hand it off to one of our guys in the back, we will try to address that before Tammy comes up.
Well, thank you. I appreciate coming back to this organization here and all the years I've had to represent this area in Congress and the time I spent in the Senate, got to know people in that place. So when I hear your stories about this session, gentlemen, Zach and Lynn, I think fresh blood in there and strong people with good principles. And we need a lot more of that. Your job gets easier. And that's what I would like to see. Just thinking too about I just listened to the discussion about the heartbeat bill, and I have a long history with that. and the drama of that. When I walked in the Capitol building that day, the guard, I've got a pretty tough demeanor, but I cringed. It was so bad. You can't think that there's good on their side of this argument. And you know that there's a lot of good on our side. June 24th, I would introduce a resolution that would have declared June 24th to be a national holiday to put Roe versus Wade behind us. Now the battles go on in Congress and in the states. I think Mayor Scott said that really well, which was it's not just a state's issue, but the states must get it right. And that's what you're working and doing. And I was so glad I could just be there to soak it all up by osmosis that day. But I really came here to talk to you a little bit about the CO2 pipeline and property rights and where this thing is going, where it might go, and some about what I've been doing with it. I'll just say for this, I had watched this thing unfold. I saw the appropriations that came. I saw them try to pass the Green New Deal or the Build Back Better plan, and I saw Senator Joe Manchin block that because he had something that he wanted, which was a pipeline going to West Virginia. So that killed it. They brought it back then in it was called the Inflation Reduction Act, which was about as misnomer as you can have, and most bills are misnomer bills. And that took this subsidy up to $85 a metric ton for CO2 that's sequestered. That really launched it. And that's then, so I'm watching what happens here, and I'm hearing Summit say we're not going to use eminent domain. I'm hearing Navigator say we're not going to use eminent domain. We're going to negotiate with these landowners, and all in good faith, and we'll build this pipeline to. It's not a pipeline. Oh, auctioneer style. Thanks. It's not like build a pipeline to nowhere, like the bridge to nowhere in Alaska we all heard about some years ago. But instead, this is a pipeline that it only can have one function that I can figure out. As I watch this thing, Summit's building a pipeline that goes from near southeast Iowa all the way up through and catches some of Nebraska and southwest Minnesota and South Dakota, ends up in North Dakota. And Navigator has a pipeline that starts in South Dakota, goes down through Nebraska, Iowa, they reached up into Minnesota, ends up in Illinois. These two guys, why do you have pipelines that are running parallel with each other, cross each other 3 times, and run in opposite directions? What sense can that make? And how does this come together? So I hope I can explain this in a way that it does make sense. But first, I would take this back. I want to make sure that everybody understands this, and that is that I've been involved in support of the ethanol industry since as far back as I can determine. It's 1978. And that started out sitting in kitchen tables with people saying, you know, we've got corn that isn't worth anything. We're really good at raising it. That's why it isn't worth anything. Let's make a better market for it. And so as those ideas came together in the kitchen table, and then people came together, I recall going to an energy expo in Des Moines, and I saw a demonstration by Dennis Day. He was a farmer out of Grimes. He and his sons had built a still. Nobody knew about this then. And they were producing ethanol. They converted their Deutz tractors over to ethanol, and they were farming with Deutz tractors and homemade ethanol. And we were ready to go home because gas prices were high, and go start our welders and build our own stills and make our own fuel. And he told us the last thing he said was, you know, you're all impressed with this. You're welcome to come and see our operation here. And we did, by the way, on the way home. But he said, come tomorrow morning, hurry, because tomorrow morning the boys and I are going out, and we're going to take the torch, and we're going to cut this thing all up and start all over because it's not good enough. That's what it was about 1983. So I'm telling you that because the history of my particular involvement in this and our congressional office, I finally got it squeezed out of my district director how many ethanol plants we have been involved in helping put the right people together so you can have producer and owners who are the people that would stay in the community, keep the money in the community, which was the idea in the first place. And I finally got this number out of him, and I'll just say, roundly speaking, real close to half of the ethanol plants in Iowa, my staff, more so than I in many cases, but me too, had a voice in who would be at that table to start this thing going and counseled it. So we've been cheerleaders for this, is a technical way of saying it. And ethanol has been great for our markets, it's been great for our economy, and I want to keep that going. But those people on the other side, they're telling you that, well, no, the ethanol industry is going to die if we don't get this subsidy. And whenever I hear those things, why is that? Well, this comes at me continually. There was a study that was done, and it said that it's worth $1 a bushel on corn if you set up all these pipelines and take the subsidy. So I looked at that study. I don't remember exactly who did it, but I know who paid for it. It was the Iowa Renewable Fuels Association, the Iowa Corn Growers. Well, then I asked the people that promoted that study, can you name a study that anybody hired to get done that produced the opposite result that they wanted, that they still published? No. So once you see a study like this that says maybe $1 a gallon, that's what they paid for, they got what they paid for. And I don't think we saw any of the data behind there, any of the calculations. I didn't see it for sure. So, okay, if it's worth $1 though, if we stipulate that it's worth $1 a bushel, what happens to the other $2.71 of subsidy that's going in? As I built this, when I was looking at the global warming from the beginning, the earth is going to get warmer and it's going to be a travesty, and the sea levels are going to rise by multiple feet, and the heat will cook us out, and it's the end of the planet as we know it. That was kind of it. And I spent a lot of my life cold. You know, working in the construction company, you do what you have to do. You know, there's got to be something good about a warmer earth, isn't there? And so I took that legal pad and I drew a line down through the middle, like I do when it's time to make a decision. And what are all the good things? Well, first, what are all the bad things? That was easy to find. Go on the internet and a long, long list of how bad this was. And then you ask, what's good about it? You can't hardly find anybody that'll tell you what's good about it. But more people die of cold than they do of heat. And there's a lot of things I can tell you about. Here's one way I rationalize it this way, is that 70% of the earth is covered by water. And I know from actual field experiments that in July, and I know this is August now, but you lose 1/4 of an inch of evaporation off the water surface in Iowa in July. That's because it's warm. In January, you lose 0. So that means if 70% of the earth is covered by water and the earth gets warmer, there's more evaporation goes up into the air. And according to Newton's law of physics, what goes up must come down. It comes down in the form of rain, snow, sleet, or hail. That means more precipitation in more places than we had before. Seems to me that if CO2 goes up and rain comes down, we get more green growth and we can feed more people and do a better job of that. So I don't think it's all bad that they're predicting here. That's a shorthand version of, you never hear this though because it doesn't support their agenda. And so then I look back in the history of what's going on. And I had not been one that paid very much attention to the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, Larry Fink, George Soros. Well, I found out that George Soros was Jewish when I criticized him publicly, and they called me an anti-Semite. I had to look it up. Is he Jewish? Why are they calling me that? Yeah. So, you know, I wasn't even in that arena. But as I went back into the history of the World Economic Forum and traced it clear back to 1970, they formed under a different name, and I think they converted it to World Economic Forum in 1988. They have a history in there of their accomplishments. Ding, 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 ding. So many things that they have done, they push to us. And, for example, the Build Back Better plan. That was rooted in Davos, and they gave the marching orders out of there, and here it came. And you heard it out of the lips of Joe Biden almost immediately. Build back better, build back better. They picked up that line immediately. But the construction of this concept of carbon indexes and carbon credits has been sold through Europe. And I've been across that continent over and over again, debated this with a good number of public officials, and making the case that you got to prove the science before I'm going to buy into this whole plan that you have. And I remember standing there with a member of the German Bundestag, and he represented an area just west of Munich. And he said, I agree with you, this thing is a hoax. And I said, well, do you tell your constituents that? No, I wouldn't do that. Why not? Well, they put me out of office. How about I tell them? Well, how about you stand next to me while I tell them? No. Gives you an idea of what's happened out here. They have spent billions of dollars to pump this into the brains of everybody in the first world that I can think of, and our children especially. 2 generations of kids have grown up with this in front of them, and who was there to present the other side of that argument? It's embraced. So their exercises are global warming, and what AOC said that our planet, we're going to be extinct in 12 years if we don't do something, and that's 6 years ago. I haven't seen us getting very close to that yet. But this came out of Europe. It came out of Geneva, where the offices are, and then it goes to Davos, where the convention is. And the World Economic Forum's got several locations around the world. And it is Klaus Schwab that originated this. And George Soros is probably the key player in that. But in the middle of that is Larry Fink. Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock Investment. And he controls over $10 trillion, the largest investment in the world. It's bigger than almost every country's economy in the world. He controls that, sits on the board, at the World Economic Forum, pushes this carbon index globally. So we've got companies like Maersk, the largest freight company in the world, that's got 700 ships out on the oceans, and diesel engines driving them. They have to convert to likely methanol by 2035, I believe it is, or they won't be able to dock at the ports in Europe. That's leverage that comes back on us. So I guess, watching this clock, how do we get where we need to go with all of this? They want to trample on your property rights. The Constitution protects them. Fifth Amendment says, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. That decision held up for 200+ years until in 2005 a Kelo decision came down, and that decision was erroneously founded. That's my opinion, that's Justice Scalia's opinion, and 3 other of the justices that wrote the dissent. It was a 5-4 decision. He looked me in the eye about a week after that decision, and he said, it is an erroneous decision, and it will be reversed one day. Now we're faced with the biggest property rights taking, I think, in the history of the country. And if they succeed, if Summit succeeds and Navigator succeeds in taking your right to property, private property from private people, from a private company for private gain, that's unprecedented in our country. At least unprecedented as far as the resistance that's coming from us, and we should be resisting. And so what I have done is I got jumped into this thing with both feet. It is consuming, it's like a full-time job, only don't pay me because I don't want anybody to tell me what to do. And so, but I'm a former chairman of the Constitution Committee in the United States Congress. I've always cared about this. There's always been a Constitution in my pocket for 25 or more years. Whenever I wear a jacket, there's a Constitution in there, close to my heart. And so I'm committed to defending your constitutional rights. I've hired an attorney. Her name is Anna Ryan. She has practiced before the Utilities Board for a number of years, and she's the only one. She's sharp as she can be. I don't want to trade her out for anybody. But the only people that know about this Utilities Board litigation, that are the only attorneys that are good at this, are already working for Summit and Navigators, except Anna Ryan. And now they have blocked her from representing me before the Iowa Utilities Board. We're appealing it, and we formed a group called the King Interveners, and we're going to do battle at every stage along the way. Every stop, every place we can find to get a skirmish, we'll have a skirmish. We'll have a battle where we can create a battle. Well, and at the end of this thing, it is a war. And it is a war that in the end, they expect to draw down $17 billion a year of your tax dollars, all sunk money, with no way to ever see a return on that, or ever see a change in the temperature of the earth, or ever show that it did anything. And they plotted it in Geneva and in Davos, and they pushed it and sold it to Europe, then they sold it to the Democrats in this country, and when they got Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer, the trifecta, they passed that bill and launched this. Now it's on us. And that effort that they have, if they're successful, property rights will be a thing of the past. And as I said back here in the back of the room, if they succeed in taking our property rights for private gain, then with this pipeline, there's nothing that keeps them from putting a wind turbine in your backyard, or solar panels on your roof, or an entertainment center in your backyard for that matter. They can do anything they want to you. The principle that's at stake here is private property, and the private property that can be, if it can be taken by someone who has more money and more political power, more influence, then that was what we wanted to protect in the beginning. That's what our framers of the Constitution said. They wanted to have property rights so you would have confidence in your investment. Man's home is his castle, for example. And that goes rooted deeply in Old English law. So I'm really concerned about this. There are better alternatives too. Better alternatives for ethanol, better alternatives for our future. And many of them are being articulated well by a gentleman I've just met a few months ago named Doyle Turner out of Mobile. And he knew a lot when I met him that day. He's packed his brain full of a lot more. He spoke last night in Charles City, and I talked with him several times a day after day. But I learned more listening to him speak than I had learned before. And it's this, that these pipelines, the purpose of them, I guess I promised I was going to tell you the purpose of them, and that is, if you set up a network of these pipelines going opposite directions that go to the ethanol plants in these states that we mentioned, if Bruce Rattestatter can do that, and if Larry Fink can do that, then whatever kind of contracts they have with the ethanol plants, they're going to expire at some point. They will control, they have a monopoly on the CO2. And you give those two guys a monopoly on the CO2, that means the ethanol plants can't market it to anybody else because they're signed up in contracts with Summit or with Navigator. And then they know also that you can convert the CO2 to methanol. And, I mean, we figured that out. They knew it before we began to think about figuring it out. And they know that it's a valuable commodity. And CO2 can add to the revenue stream of the ethanol plants. And we've got two companies that have signed letters of intent that they would build a methanol conversion, CO2 to methanol conversion at every ethanol plant that's a part of this network, right at that location. They won't need eminent domain. They only need a small little piece of ground right there at the ethanol plant, and they can ship the methanol on the same way we ship ethanol, or you can put it in a pipeline. But we don't need the pipeline. And so I want to see these methanol plants come in as a way that keeps us from having to go to the United States Supreme Court. But I hired Anna Ryan as my attorney and the attorney for the King Intervenors because we're going to fight every battle. And all the while this is going on, we're laying the foundation to take this thing through litigation every step of the way, all the way with an eye to the Supreme Court. And the reason for that is these people are so rich, so powerful, looking at so much money, there's no decision anywhere along the line that's going to deter them. Not one. They will find more money, more lawyers. They'll get a legislature to change the law for them if they need to. And if we get them to the Supreme Court, the supreme power of the land, and when they say no, no means no, I think at that point, they're still not going to admit they're defeated. I think they'll go to the Congress and ask them to change the law somehow. But they have to be fought, and free enterprise goes down the drain. Our right to property goes down the drain if this happens. And it's an economic debacle. You heard me say $17 billion. And that's an annual payment from the taxpayers to actually the three pipeline companies. Wolf is over there and not using eminent domain yet. It's a small 280-mile pipeline. But with $17 billion a year coming down from them, all of it tax money, all of it subsidized, paying for a commodity that has no value, that can be turned into methanol, a commodity that has value. I can't imagine how foolish this is. And then I got a little deeper, so I'll just take it to this place. I heard Senator John Kennedy asking the number 2 of the Department of Energy in a hearing under oath, how much is it going to cost us to get to carbon neutral in 2050? And he kept backing away from that. He wouldn't give that answer. And John Kennedy is a pretty wily guy about asking another question, finding a way to narrow it down. I'm impressed with him. He's got that country style that we like anyway. But he could not get an answer out of that Department of Energy number 2. The energy fella kept saying, well, I'm more concerned about what it'll cost us if we don't do this. And so I thought, okay, I've been thinking about this, but I had the numbers on my desk filed in there, that my chronological filing system, you know, how it goes day by day, it piles up. And so I pulled those numbers together, plugged them into a spreadsheet, and then the math in a spreadsheet doesn't lie. The numbers we put in there might be, but I took numbers off of their websites and put them in. Then I went and found the actual, what should I say, the quantities of the volume that are not contested scientifically, and did the math on this. So what would be the cost? This is, by the way, this is the low-hanging fruit. This should be the cheapest approach to sequestering a metric ton of CO2. The cheapest approach to sequestering a metric ton of CO2 that you can get. This 98% pure CO2 coming out of the stack of ethanol plants is the largest volume of the purest CO2 anybody can find in the world. It's a holy grail. You would go right to this if you were getting paid for sequestering CO2. You'd come to the Midwest and you would drool at the idea of hooking up all of that and hanging on to it. And so that's what they have done, and they propose these pipelines for that reason. And if they get the pipelines built and hooked up, then they have set up a duopoly. And they will control the supply of CO2, and they'll be able to starve the ethanol plants out eventually. That's why you don't see Bruce Rastetter or Larry Fink buying ethanol plants. They're going to squeeze them down, starve them, and then in the end, they will own the whole network. And the money goes out; it doesn't stay here. So I can't find. Remember the Rubik's Cube? Turn that around over and over again. I've done that with this proposal. And it looks worse and worse every time. There's no upside. There really is no upside. The upside is in finding an alternative. The methanol plant proposals qualify for these subsidies. I disagree with the subsidies But if we're gonna have to pay subsidies out of our tax dollars, then let them come in a place where we don't have to trample on people's constitutional rights. And I will defend them right out to the end, those constitutional rights. That's been my life. And so I'll close with this. The Kelo decision, when it came down, I just lit up when it happened. I've been watching it. And the decision, when it came 5-4 decision from the Supreme Court, that Suzette Kelo didn't have the right to her own property. She couldn't say no, even though she owned her house, because the city of New London, Connecticut, thought that they could convert that, condemn her property and her neighbors, hand it over to a developer, turn it into a development, and then collect more tax dollars. That was their rationale. Well, 5 members of the Supreme Court made the erroneous decision that just because it was not just a public use, but they called it a public purpose. And they added those words into their interpretation of the Constitution. They rewrote the Fifth Amendment. They struck out 3 words that said, nor shall private property be taken. The 3 words for public use, they took that out without just compensation. Now it just says, nor shall private property be taken without just compensation. And these people, these moguls, have taken this thing and they want to exploit it. And we have to defend it, and we have to reverse it. We have to stand up on these principles, and almost everybody that's doing us in, from the top level down, takes an oath to this Constitution just like I have time after time. So I say to all of them, stand up and defend your constitutional rights and keep your oath to the Constitution. And let's keep an essential pillar of American exceptionalism, refurbish it so we can have a future for our children and grandchildren. Thanks so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Steve. If I could have you 3 maybe stand up here. We've got 2 questions up here. One of them's more so directed at you 2, but Steve, you probably have some good insight as well. This first question is, the volume of carbon captured by the proposed pipeline could also be captured by 250 to 500 million new trees. Why does the government never discuss mass tree planting as a carbon capture strategy?
Because ultimately it has nothing to do with capturing carbon or even changing the climate. It's all about
Thank you.
behave yourself. It's all about taking your taxpayer money and putting it in somebody's pocket. It's as simple as that. So reasonable, rational solutions like tree growth, like putting capture systems at each ethanol plant, and creating one more product that could be sold out of that bushel of corn. That makes sense. They don't want that. They want to build a pipeline, put it in their pocket. They want to corner the market on CO2 for future use. So I guess that's the answer, my answer to that question.
I would echo that, but I would also say I think that we need to take a hard look at where we've progressed as a nation. We continue to elect individuals who are so far removed from our founding principles. It's almost as if we're asking to be enslaved. I mean that very respectfully. I mean that very lovingly. But when we continue to elect people, when their goal is just to enslave us and to create a bloated government to strip us of everything that our country was founded on that is great, then this is the result. Planting trees is great, but planting trees doesn't enslave anybody. Planting trees doesn't make anybody money. It's all about enslaving people and stripping them of their fundamental freedoms. And so I'm all for planting trees, but until we get rid of a bloated, godless, hateful government, there will be no planting trees. It will only be planting pipelines.
I love trees too, but one of the wrong places are perennial weed, for example. I actually made that point to the U.S. forester. Anyway, the part I think that it's interesting is that I'm in Congress. We have our Republican conference meets in secret, not really secret, but closed door. And in there, Liz Cheney and a couple other people brought this idea to make this pitch about And so they had 2 or 3 presenters there that came out of the blue as far as I was concerned. They said, we have a better idea than all of this carbon capture business. We are going to be the ones that advocate planting a trillion trees, and that will sequester the carbon, which is where this question comes from. And I didn't speak in that meeting. I'm just listening, and other people got up and said, you're not planting in my district. We raise corn, or we have cotton, or we have peanuts. We don't have land for trees. And that was something, so they got a big pushback, and they shut that idea down. It just went into the back of my memory. I hadn't heard anything about it before, and nothing about it since, until I was doing the research on the World Economic Forum. And there, one of the board members has got praise because he generated the idea of planting a trillion trees. And so I could see that, okay, they generated an idea in Davos, and it ended up in the closed-door session of the United States Congress, Republican. Bang, that's how much power those people have. They have to have a place for the trees. I love the trees. I remember Rush Limbaugh, he would say, there's more trees now than we've ever had before. And so I better stop there. But there's a lot of power out there that's global, and we need to shut down the global. And I'll just say bluntly that if we don't take down the World Economic Forum, we're going to lose our freedom.
Thank you, gentlemen. We've got one more question. I'll just say now, if you would like to grab any more refreshments, do that here quick. And then Carla and Tammy, if you want to make your way up here, we'll get you started here after this last question. And this is kind of more so directed at Zach and Lynn. Do you believe climate change is a threat, and is CO2 a driver? Not my question, just for the record. Get some dirty looks.
Those of you who have a phone, you can look this up if you like. Our atmosphere is comprised of 0.04% carbon dioxide. Hundreds of years ago, it was 0.04% carbon dioxide. I guarantee 10 years from now, it'll be 0.04% carbon dioxide. So do I think climate is changing? Climate changes cyclically. We know that. Scientific research of drilling into polar ice caps shows that. Is man changing that? I think minimally. So I guess that's my answer. I don't know who asked the question, but I don't know. Hopefully somebody's looking that up just to fact check me. But was I right? There we go. So, you know, one of the when you talk about greenhouse effect, and the greenhouse effect is why we can exist on this planet. It makes it livable. It keeps heat in. It's not a bad thing, okay? But they twist the words to scare you, okay? Do you know one of the biggest gases in our atmosphere that contributes to the greenhouse effect? Water vapor. Water vapor has more of an impact on keeping our planet warm than the CO2. So is that the next thing that we're going to start sequestering, water vapor? Or are we all going to have to quit breathing? You know, you talk about the tree, go back to the tree thing. I'm pretty sure that we have millions of little carbon sequesters out in our fields right now in corn and soybeans. I mean, they use carbon dioxide every bit as much as trees. You know, the whole part of northwest Iowa is covered with it. So anyway, that's my answer.
So I would stick to a few things that I've read personally. We have examples like the Amazon rainforest, certainly in the Midwest during harvest season, or not during harvest season, but during our crop growing season. You have areas of the world like the Black Forest up in Russia that encircles almost 3/4 of our globe that help to recirculate our oxygen around the globe once a year. And so, do I believe that climate change is a threat? No, I don't. I think that these things are cyclical. I would agree with Lynn. I've also read that. I believe that those things are factual. I've listened to people testify before Congress under oath. I listened to one gentleman in particular, I don't know his name off the top of my head, who actually testified under oath before Congress that he would have a more comfortable time arguing for biblical creationism than man-made climate change. And so I think that it's something that I think climate change is something that will always affect our planet, and I think the driving force is just whatever somebody can use to make money and take away our rights, whether it's CO2 or something else. I think CO2 is just, and I mean this tongue in cheek, is just getting the bad rap right now. I think in 10 or 20 or 30 years it'll be something else, and we'll have something else to battle. And so our climate is going to continue to change. I think we can continue to take care of our planet in a way that is appropriate, that means us collaborating together to figure it out, not stripping each other of our freedoms. And so I think we can do both at the same time, rather than just freak out over the climate change thing, because I don't personally believe it is a threat. So.
I've already heard what I had to say about it, so I'm listening to these answers and I agree with them. But I would just make the point that if you're going to stampede people, you have to create an apocalypse to scare them into stampeding. And that's what I believe this is. I think it was strategically created. There's another point that there's a book called Human Universals written by Professor Donald E. Brown, UC Berkeley, believe it or not. And in there, the universals, all common denominators of humanity. We all socialize around food, for example. We all decorate and adorn our bodies with something. These common denominators, one of them is, every civilization since the Garden of Eden has always tried to, quote, affect the weather, whether it was a rain dance or whether it's global warming.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. As mentioned, if you would like to refill coffee, water, cookies, we've got those in the back. Otherwise, I think we will roll right into discussions with Carla and Tammy, if you want to make your way up here to the front. To note, these next two speakers are kind of to give you an idea of resources available to help you navigate some of these rights that are being encroached on by people, like they have mentioned, of trying to make a quick buck. So we will start with Carla.
As she said, my name is Carla. I'm not huge in public speaking, so bear with me. I believe on the tables there is a flyer. This is my son's going to hold this up, about an event that's going to be held 2 weeks from this Wednesday in Sheldon, Iowa. It is August 16th at 7 p.m. at the Sheldon Event Center. It is focused on defending our liberties. It's time to start standing up. We cannot keep sitting down and thinking that elected officials are going to take care of things or think that it doesn't happen here. This is focused on educating the public, concerned citizens, law enforcement, on our Constitution and the founding principles that are held within it. It is so important. As I said, we think this stuff is not happening here. It is. It's happening in our communities. It's happening in your backyards. We are speaking from experience. We had the ATF show up at our house in Sioux County to confiscate legal gun parts. So it is happening. It's time to stand up, to educate ourselves. And as much as I think it's amazing you all have shown up here, we've got to get the younger generation. We've got to get the 20s, the 30s, the 40-year-olds. This is our future right here. And if we don't start doing something, he's not going to be able to stand up. He's not going to have private property, and it is so terrifying to me. The event, like I said, is 2 weeks from this Wednesday. There is a $10 fee just to help cover costs. If you are law enforcement, please reach out to the email that is on the bottom of the flyer because you will be covered for free to attend.
Now we're going to hear from Tammy, and I just want to mention too, we will have some time afterwards for some more questions, and I believe, Lynn and Zach will also be sticking around for questions if you want to maybe catch them and talk to them one-on-one afterwards as well.
Well, welcome. Welcome. Can you hear me? I have a really loud mom voice that I would be willing to use. Thank you. I'm Tammy Coxa with the John Burke Society, and before we get started, as I was listening to Zach and Lynn and Steve, Congressman Steve talk, I want to just acknowledge you guys have statesmen, you don't have politicians down there. Can you give them a round of applause? Thank you. There are very few statesmen in the nation today, and you've got 3 of them here. I would like to just briefly introduce myself. I'm Tammy Kobza. I am the field coordinator for Iowa, Eastern Nebraska, Eastern South Dakota, Southern North Dakota, and I'm a farm girl, and they hired me shortly before, unknowingly, the pipeline came through. And of all the people to get that understand what's going on with Agenda 2030 and a farm girl, I feel like I was placed sometimes in the right place at the right time. And I want to give you guys some information tonight and help you to understand that if there is ever a time where Americans cannot be slack, it is now. If you think 7 or 8 people are going to battle this back and win, you will not have your children or your grandchildren having private property, religious liberty, freedom of speech. We're already seeing that squelched. If we've ever seen the love of money is the root of all evil, this is it. Before I get into my presentation, I wanted to cover one aspect that has not been discussed last night. We've been working on this, fighting this pipeline for quite some time, and there's a very dangerous component that you all need to know. If you think, are there any EMTs in the crowd? You're an EMT? Good. Oh, and Chuck, thank you for putting this together. You're an EMT. If you think, people, that your firefighter is going to come and rescue you when these pipelines rupture, as they have, you are wrong. The firefighters are not prepared. There is no way they can save you. And I will get into that. But this is part of their plan. And firefighter Dan Harvey has spoken about the CO2 kill zone. And basically what happens when these pipelines ruptured, and they have Satarsha, Mississippi, there's Colorado, there's Montana. We don't know how many others have ruptured that the media just hasn't covered. It is heavier than air, and it suffocates everything within a kill zone, hundreds of feet. That's why our great county supervisors are fighting for setbacks of, a mile or 2 from any living thing. And they're being sued by Summit and Navigator. It's very dangerous. Firefighters are not going to go in with whatever your backpacks are called to rescue you at 1,100 feet. They won't make it. And the Navigator crew told Dan Harvey, well, you'll have to decide basically how many people you're willing to sacrifice. That's it in a nutshell. They don't care about your life, and that's a hard thing for us to kind of come to terms with. Governor Reynolds told some farmers, I don't believe in this carbon capture stuff, I don't believe in global warming, but we've got to see how it plays out. This is why you standing up, your county supervisors standing up, and your sheriffs is so important. We understand that people have not known how to defend their constitutional rights because they don't know their constitutional rights, and that even has been on purpose because they quit teaching civics around the turn of the century last year, of 1900. So what the John Birch Society does, we teach the Constitution, and we teach who's trying to destroy our Constitution. I'm going to give you a brief synopsis of how we got launched, why we're still around. In 1899, a man named Robert Welch was born, and he started reading at age 2, was doing algebra at 4, read a 9-series volume of history at the age of 7, and graduated from high school at 12. This is all in North Carolina. He was homeschooled, by the way, because the teachers obviously couldn't keep up with him. Graduated from college at age 16, decided to be a lawyer since he loved history and the law, and kind of had a little tuffle with his law professor, left that and went back to his family's candy factory where he became a businessman. After World War II, he was appalled at the communist infiltration in our nation. There were thousands of liberty groups all over the nation fighting this fire, that fire, and this fire. And he was watching them. He was watching them fizzle out. He was watching them fight amongst each other. And he ended up pulling together his men that he sat on this American Business Association board with. He was the president of it. Pulled them together and said, I have a solution on how to save our country. That was in 1958, December 1958, and he spoke to them for 2 days, and it's in the Blue Book. And what he basically said was, we have to start teaching the Constitution. We have to start naming who is trying to undermine our nation, and we have to have paid field coordinators. That was probably the biggest difference between a lot of the other groups. Everybody else was a volunteer and they would fizzle out because you know how tiring this work is. And they did not name the enemy. So basically what he did is he started naming the enemy in January of 1959, and in 1961 the communists got together in Moscow and said, listen guys, we got a problem. The House Committee on the Un-American Activities, we need to stop that because they were ferreting out the communists in our government, and we need to stop the John Birch Society. And I was talking with someone earlier, and he was talking about the slurs that JBS has had here, and I see that in Iowa in particularly. I think it's because Iowa was so strong for the John Birch Society in the 60s and 70s. But anyway, we even have a paper here that we've written about what happened because we were accused of being communist, anti-Semitic, racist, crackpots, and the CIA came up with that term conspiracy to use against us. Because what Mr. Welch saw was that the communists had infiltrated every major institution in America. The seminaries, 300,000 churches were infiltrated by the Communist Party in the mid-60s. That's why if you've seen the enemies within the church, you've seen how the head of the Southern Baptist Convention, Albert Mohler, has repented of his whiteness. That's part of the tearing down of America. When we think we are going to battle races against, each other against races. We're one race, we're the human race, and we have a little different culture, but we're humans, and if they can get us to fight against each other, that's what they like to do. So that's even infiltrated the Southern Baptist Convention, one of the largest blocks of Christians in our nation. And they infiltrated the colleges, the teaching colleges in particular, the library degree. They want the critical race theory. They want the LGBTQ. They want the destruction of the family. And as Lenin has said, you can sum up communism in one sentence: the abolition of private property. So the wolf is at your door. And if we don't win this battle, it's a very, very crucial battle. There have been a lot of battles. But if we don't win this battle, the car in your garage isn't safe. I think Senator Evans was talking about that, how everything is up for grabs. And what they've also done in the schools is they have taken out the Creator so that we worship the creation. And in worshiping the creation, the Lord will not be mocked. And so he is letting things happen in this nation, I believe, to wake us up, to turn him back in his grace, to turn us back to the Creator. He's got this. It took him one day to put the atmosphere together. He's got to be laughing, as are the communists, about this CO2 boondoggle. This is another thing about Marxism that Mr. Welch saw. He saw that there is no way that Americans would buy into the traditional Marxism, oppressor versus oppressee, because we had a thriving middle class, we had a thriving economy, we had economic freedom, we had private property. We would never buy that line. And so what they did, and in '92 they had a big hula in Rio de Janeiro, they made sure that they were using the environment as the way to take America's private property away. You can read about Agenda 21, and now it's Agenda 2030. They were hoping to get to this destruction of our nation where we don't have our Constitution anymore by 2000. Enough people stood up against it. We've pushed it back. So they pushed it to Agenda 2030. That's the logo right now. And they are realizing, and JBS has an agenda. We have agendas of certain things. Agenda 21 is it. And basically now it's Agenda 2050. Because people like you are doing what you're doing. You're standing up against the globalists. And the globalists are using people, it's filtering down into the state level. The reason our sheriff is so important is because they will protect our liberties. If they understand their constitutional duty. And this training that's going to happen August 16th, please try to attend and get your sheriff, his deputies, your police department to attend, because we must not comply. We kind of flunked the big test with COVID. They found out that we would comply, even though there weren't people dropping in the streets. This was not a threat that it was concocted, and people are knowing that. We have an agenda that Mr. Welch then put together. We would protect the Constitution and teach it. We would protect our school children from learning and to learn the truth. And we have a Freedom Project Academy, a homeschool that teaches classical Christian schools. We would take on the United Nations at the time. He called them the insiders. But now they have hooked hands, with the World Economic Forum. Mr. Welch died in 1985. But he saw that, and he saw one major area that he saw was the Council on Foreign Relations. These were the globalists that got together in the early 1900s, and they wanted to take our Constitution and our sovereignty away then, and they thought it would be slick by suggesting the League of Nations. But our senators still had that classical education, that God-based education, and they said, you know what, I don't think we want to be part of the League of Nations because I think we'll lose our sovereignty. So the CFR and the CCP, Chinese Communist Party, 1921, were birthed. They were birthed. And they are very patient, and they understand this will take some time, but they will go after it. The Council on Foreign Relations is a group of globalists that infiltrate all these institutions. And they particularly like to infiltrate in the government roles, the Department of Defense, the Department of Justice. What we have done is we have looked back throughout history since FDR's time, and we have a list of the presidents and their agencies and all the CFR members, which are one globalist and get rid of God. They have infiltrated our government in that deeply. The first Secretary of State that was not a Council on Foreign Relations member was under Donald Trump. That was the first one. He still had some CFR in his cabinet. He couldn't get rid of them all, but he was definitely trying to. I believe that the reason Congressman King is not in DC anymore representing us, it's because the globalists took him out. Because Congressman King talked about defending the Constitution, borders, life, and English as our national language, amongst a whole other things that the communists could not tolerate. And what they do is they do smears. They didn't have the goods on him because what these people do is they sometimes will get politicians in compromising positions and blackmail them or bribe them. And they even come out and say politicians, like BlackRock, has said politicians are really cheap. You can buy one for $10,000. So Congressman King wasn't for sale. So what they're doing, they're pushing the UN one world religion. And there is no room for the true God in that religion. And without the true God, a nation will fall. That's what the scriptures say. So what we're up against is a spiritual battle. This is truly evil versus truth. And if we don't understand that and what these pipelines, I'm going to swerve into the pipelines again. The pipelines are a lie. There's no such thing as man-made climate change. But like I said earlier, this is how they get Americans to give up their rights through environmental, concerns. It's all over. You stay in a hotel, your toilet paper is wrapped in a thing earth-friendly. I mean, it's all over. We're so inundated in it. Basically, then, what they're doing is they are trying to steal our land, taking private property away, communist blink. And these pipelines are very dangerous. They're, the CO2, when we breathe it, you're exhaling it, is harmless. It's good, it's the gas of life. But when it's pressurized in these pipe at between 1400 PSI and 2400 PSI, they rupture and it's immediate death. We have a CO2 kill zone that Dan Harvey, the firefighter, has put together, as well as Cindy and Joe Golding over in the Lynn County area. And I can get you that paperwork. But these pipelines are about stealing and death. And one of the UN's population, to get us all off the land, is also depopulation of the world, down to about 500 million people. And you think, well, who's going to serve these overlords, right? AI. Have you seen the AI stuff that's been coming out? Artificial intelligence? And this sounds science fiction-y to you, doesn't it? But they tell it to you. They are so bold. Mr. Welch said, when the end comes near, these globalists will be like running through the street naked. They will be so bold that they think they've got it made. And the Build Back Better, we publish a monthly magazine, well, it's twice a month, the New American, and the subtitle is that freedom shall not perish. It's material you're not going to read anywhere else. It is not, quote, the breaking news, but it's the background on a lot of things and what you as Americans can do to save your nation. We focus on the ESG, the environment, social governance, so that you all know that. The Indiana farmers that are can't in Des Moines, the JBS conference is going to be there. A man who documented what happened to the Netherlands, the farmers there, Nitrogen 2000, they took their cattle away. Farmers were killing them, were committing suicide. He's going to be there on how that government, this is a worldwide project. This isn't just in America, but it is in the more developed countries. And the more developed countries are buying this globalism, this carbon capture stuff. But he is going to be in Des Moines September 8th and 9th. I think you've all got flyers on it. Yes. Oh, okay. So basically, what we want to share is Mr. Welch decided we were going to have, he's going to name it the John Birch Society. And because of the conspiracy. And basically what happened is people didn't want to believe it. because it was happening with the Illuminati back in May 1st, 1776, where they were trying to already take down our nation. And people didn't want to believe there was such a assault on our nation. But what happened, the Illuminati, there was a guy that was giving the message to one of the other gentlemen that was in this conspiracy, riding through a storm, and his horse got struck by lightning, and the guy died. But that's where the papers were found, that there was indeed a conspiracy to take down our nation already in May of 1776. So that's what we're fighting. Don't let people convince you that there is not a conspiracy. A conspiracy is just two people in private plotting for evil, not two people in private plotting a birthday party. It's for plotting for evil, and that is what is actually happening. So what he did is he launched the John Birch Society, and we have chapters across the nation, and we need your help, because the time is of the essence, and what they do is they have an agenda, and they give you the materials and the marching orders. This is not an eat, meet, and retreat organization. It's an eat, meet, and act. Because if all you do is eat and meet and go home, you get frustrated. But if you eat, meet, and act and see action happen, see good results, then you get motivated to defend your country. We teach you the Constitution. It's all on our website, jbs.org. We teach you the Bill of Rights, and we give you tools on what to share with your legislators. I think Lynn and Zach have received a lot of information that they can do at the state level. We defend the Constitution from the Convention of States. That's an opening up of our Constitution, which they really want to do. We want to enforce the Constitution, but you can't enforce it if you don't know it. So what we're doing, we have many Birchers that are working together at the local level. These issues that we face in our nation can be kind of overwhelming. So people want to just kind of sit and watch a 3-hour informational meeting and think, well, what can I do, right? And it doesn't do any good to be the most highly educated constitutionalist in the concentration camp. So what we're asking is for small groups to do actions and to work at something in your local community, like what Carla and Chuck are doing with the constitutional sheriff, training the sheriffs. That's going to be huge. We don't want you to bite off the elephant. We want you to bite off one bite in your local community and educate your fellow citizens, and then do some action things that JBS encourages you to do. If you decide to do this, what you're doing is you're not complying then. You are going to stand and defend your liberties. And if any of you have read the Doctrine of the Lesser Magistrates, an old biblical concept where the sheriff, where the pastor, where a father stands in the gap when there is tyranny that is unconstitutional in our case, where they're going to trample on our God-given rights. The UN, we want to get out of the United Nations, the UN has human declared rights. We as a constitutional republic have God-given rights. And that's what a lesser magistrate can do. This is what people are really learning. When the mask mandates came through, there were a few of us that would not comply. Never put a mask on, right? Some of us in here, I bet, didn't. And we got a lot of pushback from our fellow citizens, like we were somehow terrible. But we knew the story behind it. And so when you begin to stand for your liberties, we've fallen so far, you're going to get pushed back. So when Congressman King came here tonight, I don't know if you've got his book, but his book, Walking Through the Fire, I would encourage you to read it, because it'll prepare you on what you're going to face and how the Lord will watch over you and help you through these times. And he gives great documentation on how he managed to walk through the fire of what he did when they went after him. And I would say, I've had some of that, not anywhere near, but when you stand for truth, righteousness, and God, you're going to get pushback in our culture today. But don't be afraid. God is greater than he that is in the world. And stand up, because you're so young. There are young kids in here. You need a future. You know, some of us are maybe have one foot in the grave. But I don't have any desire to see my new little grandbaby living under the yoke and the horribleness of communism. People think communism and socialism are not that big of a deal because we've been so seeped in it. Read the Black Book of Communism. Read some books on the truth of what happened in communist societies. Look at what's happened in Venezuela and Chile and Cuba. So anyway, please stand with us. Join the Birch Society. They're great people. They're the cream of the crop. And help us fight this pipeline. There is, you can join. It's $87 an individual, $99 a couple for a year. You get the New American and a little bit of other information to educate you. You get together with like-minded patriots that are willing to fight with you. You're not in this alone. And if you feel like, boy, I don't know if I really want to get involved in a group, what the Birch Society does ask is if you'll consider supporting us in other ways. There's a continuing support club, you know, you can do Wounded Warrior Project and, you know, $20 a month and that sort of thing. We have that too. We have a Madison, Washington and Robert Welch Club that you could support at $30, $50, or $100 a month. That helps pay for people like me. It helps pay for these magazines. The subscription pays for a few weeks. But we want people to be educated. I have a ton of information back there. Please take a look at it, get it out to your community, and thank the people that are fighting for you, like Lynn Evans, Zach Deacon, Congressman King, because they need your encouragement. It's a hot battle. Would you agree? Yeah, but we can do this, and we ask for the Lord to go before us, and that in itself should encourage you. So if you have any questions, be happy to take them, but thank you. Congressman King, did you have anything you want to add about the pipeline regarding the Midwest Coalition? We have put together a group of people that are going throughout it's going to be the entire nation, you know. These pipelines are now in Pennsylvania, Maine, all over. But we're starting it here in Iowa because this is where people have really stood up, in South Dakota. But
yes. Thanks, Tammy, and I just appreciate your message, and I'm glad I could hear it all this time together. But yes, the formation of the Free Soil Coalition, which is a network that's going to defend this thing all the way to the Supreme Court. I look at the people that have come together, kind of, it's providential intervention, putting people in place. Tammy and I have been friends for years, as Tammy was Phyllis Schlafly before the John Birch Society, and so I know what kind of values that she has that she's anchored in. And we just naturally bonded together because we're working on the same cause. And then some of the other people involved in this. Trent Luce is a radio personality syndicated across the country in something like 40 states altogether. He's out of, that's about central Nebraska, but he's got a network that's media, and he's traveled all over these states. North and South Dakota, Nebraska is where he has the biggest influence, but also significantly within Iowa and in southwest Minnesota and Illinois. So he came together, and we needed an executive director. Tammy was doing 60 or 70 hours a week on this, and was taking her away from some of her other mission. And we finally got to the point where we did our first event at Fort Dodge about the 8th or 10th of July. And Tammy said, you know, I got to do my job, otherwise I'm not going to have one. So can you find an executive director? Well, we were stumped on that one. We knew that the ask was an honest and honorable ask. And so at the end of that meeting, Trent Luce came, dark at night, and he said, my wife and I would take on that executive director job. what could be better with the communication network skills they have, the traveling around the upper Midwest anyway, that he's already doing. It's a perfect match. Doyle Turner out of Mobile, which I mentioned, he came in with all of the science and the technology of methanol and the alternative, which is actually a very big lever that might keep us from having to litigate all the way to the Supreme Court. Person after person has stepped up to this. We've got about 7 or 8 good people and that are active every day for this, but we need a lot more. And the King Interveners, we need more people to sign up for that. I do have a few books in the back. I didn't come to sell books, but Tammy asked me if I'd bring some in. So that's what this looks like, and I'll pass this back to you.
Thank you. And if you want to support this Free Soil Coalition, at goevents101.com, you can go support that and follow the events. We just had one last night in Charles City. We're working on one in South Dakota, Southeast Iowa. There's a lot of requests now as people are having the summit sue them or even want to start to survey by digging 90-foot holes. Since when is that a survey? But that happened to Jared Bosley in South Dakota. So if you want to go and support that, get involved with us, we would love to have you. We really do need pullers at the oar, as Mr. Welch said. Oh yeah, and the freesoil.com, freesoilcoalition.com is the website where you can go read up on information. We're trying to load as much stuff in there as we can. You can find out about what the EMTs are thinking across the state. I guess if quite a few of them are telling their people that in their counties don't plan on us coming to rescue you. There are charts there and all that sort of detail. But yeah. Thank you. Okay, great. Are there any questions or anything? Or comments? Yes.
Talk a little bit about the TV.
The what, Chuck?
The television part of JBS.
I'm sorry.
That I do.
Say that again. I can't hear you.
The television part of JBS?
Oh, television. Gotcha. Television is not on my radar. I'm so sorry. Yes, we have a New American channel, newamerican.com. They've just started doing that, and if you go to the newamerican.com, you'll be able to see their TV channel. They're on Frank's Speech, and Brandon House in McClendale have given us a slot there. If you go to our website, it is chock full of information. If you email me, I've got hopefully a pad running around here. I'll get you information on whatever you're maybe interested in, but we have training on Zoom calls and events such as what Carla and Chuck will be doing. There are a lot of events that are coming up. We'd love to have you part of that, but yeah, it's a good show. And on the newamerican.com, we have a lot of interviews. JBS has been doing a tremendous amount of work on the carbon pipeline because members have been calling them saying, you've got to cover this. There's just been so many things that have happened. So you can go watch interviews of farmers and firefighters, county supervisors. You can go watch and get your education there too. So thank you so much, you guys. Appreciate it. Hope that it was helpful. If you want to join, there are applications back there, or come talk to me or Chuck or Carla. And we'd love to have you in the battle. And I think you will not regret it, nor will your children. So that's what we're about. Defending the future of America, defending our sovereignty and our Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. As we kind of wrap up here, I want to open it up to, does anybody have any other questions for any of our representatives, Tammy or Carla? Not everyone at once. With that, I want to say thank you to the Gaza Forum guys for organizing this meeting, and I encourage you to hang around, talk with our representatives, Lynn, Zach, Congressman King is still over there as well, and also Tammy will be a wealth of information, as you already have experience with resources available to you and things to help us hopefully get the future back on the straight and narrow. You got anything, Chuck?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Those two are video.
But the live stream won't stay up there until it's
that's what I was wondering. How's that going on?
Hi, Mr. King. This is current live feed. Say whatever you have to say.
Okay, who's the audience?
The audience is the world.
The world.
Yes. Sorry.
Okay, the audience is the world, and I can say whatever I want.
Well, keep it clean.
Oh, that'll be automatic. Okay, I'm looking into this camera then.
Yes.
And we're live.
Yes, you're
Okay,
live.
well this is great. Now I hope the people that are watching this saw this activity here tonight and were able to see the program, be able to see the crowd that's here. This is what the salt of the earth people, Northwest Iowa people, a lot of them rooted in farms and small towns, and we're committed to our families, to our churches, and to our communities and our farms and our land. And we're committed to our Constitution and the rule of law and the principles that have built America. And we have a term that we use, and I use it often enough, it's called American exceptionalism. Why did America emerge as the preeminent economic and the cultural power in the world? One is we came out of the World War II as the only industrialized country that hadn't been destroyed. But there's many other reasons for this. And one of them that we don't talk about very much, and that I think is important that people think, is this, that this country was built by Americans who came here by choice, by the immigration that came from all over the world, every country in the world as far as I know. And there's this thing we call American vigor. Well, where does this vigor come from? And this is a piece that others don't seem to identify, and that is, if you have 10 siblings in pick any country in the world, and one of them comes to America, you will have the one that had the most aspirations, the most desire, the most insight, and the most drive to succeed. And they come here because of the constitutional rights we have, and because of free enterprise capitalism, the rule of law. And so that's why we have such vigor here, and it's been built generation by generation. And the property rights that we're defending here tonight, they are principles of free enterprise. And if they're able to take away our constitutionally protected property rights, with this effort that's coming out of Davos, Switzerland in particular, it's a global effort. The Europeans have already bought into it. The Democrats in this country have been driven by it for a good number of years. I spent 18 years in the United States Congress debating these issues. They are pushing that at us, and they are determined to take our property rights. And if they're able to do that, then who would buy a farm? Who would invest in a farm? Who would build a house? Who would buy a business? Who would buy a lot? If someone who had more money and more political influence could just come in and take it away from you. Property rights have to be sacrosanct and protected with all vigor. And if we succeed here, then our economy can continue to grow, and America can remain the beacon for the world. If we fail here, we descend into the abyss of the socialists and the communists who don't have property rights, they don't have individual rights, and they're run by atheists. We are run by, I'll say America is driven by faithful, God-fearing people who understand that this creation came from Him, our rights come from Him, and if our rights come from God, no man and no woman can take them away. But if they come from man, the man that it comes from can take them away, and we're not going to tolerate that. Not here, not in Northwest Iowa, not in the Upper Midwest, not in the United States of America. Thanks very much. Good to chat with you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now, what, generally speaking, you say is people in the world?
Oh, it'll broadcast on our YouTube channel, Bell-Times-Courier. We've got Brian newspapers,
Okay. They post that on the website then.
The link will be on our website or straight to YouTube. And, yep.
It's not finished. And I've been friends with the Connie Wagner, and it's been 2 years since I've been in their office, and I was going to shelter them. I can't. So I stopped in, and it was like, yeah, there's just so much about this Northwest Iowa. And I have this gift. It is excellent people. And, music life, I love people, and it's not a foreign land, but it's not very it's a joy to be here. And I just think every day. All the meetings that you heard about me taking, it was hard, sure, but I never doubted. I knew that I was going to walk through this fire.
she's 8 when she's born.
Well, that happens.
I can't believe you said that.
They are so much fun though.
They are.
Yeah, well, they're.
We have a three.
Oh.
Yep.
Well, my youngest grandchild just turned 5 on Sunday. That's like, oh, it's around there.
Oh.
That's another thing. All joy in the world comes from new babies. If we stop having babies, that joy will be gone eventually. So I just love it. I just came back from a fishing trip with my three sons and my first favorite grandson. He's 14. And he doesn't realize right now that because he's my first favorite grandson, that my other favorite grandsons too.
Yep.
But it is good living. I'm a happy man and I get to do what I love to do and I get to be around great people.
Yeah, and that's his message. I agree wholeheartedly. That by the way, the person that came up going to president, in terms of being able to get
They can do it. We can still do that.
Yes, we do.
So thank you very much. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, I know.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, yeah.
Can I stop?
Huh? Yeah.